it sort of moves in a very subtle way in the same direction as the Republic. And you know, with any of these works, you have to read them and study them to see this. But it follows the same trajectory as the Republic as regards the inquiry into justice. So it also has this feature then that it leads to a new theology. You really do get new gods in the laws as well as in the Republic. You know, if I would have known what music was going to be accompanying the presentation, I could have tried to match it so that
Perfect dance, isn't it?
right, so that I could hit my crescendo at the same time or something. But it follows the same trajectory, and you get a new theology. It leads to, trying to think how to summarize best. Let me just take these last 2 points together. You have a new theology, which then leads to a criminalization of certain kinds of beliefs. So the new theology puts nous or intelligence at the peak. And then there's a law against impiety which is imposed, so that anybody who sort of holds, it's quite liberal in a certain way and very restrictive in another way, but it does turn certain kinds of beliefs into criminal beliefs. And it turns out that if you hold one of these criminal beliefs and you're caught, you're vocal about it, then you get sent to a place called the Sophronisterion, which is a moderation tank. And you have to stay there 5 years and learn how to be pious. Now, the Sophronisterion is a play on, if you read Aristophanes' Clouds, you see there that Socrates is said to, you know, to his primary place of being, to be, is this place called the think tank, a Phrontisterion. So the Sophronisterion is kind of a play on that. It's a moderation tank, and whereas it's located in the heart of the city, and it happens to be right next to a place where basically what amounts to the ruling body of the city meets. It's called the Nocturnal Council, and that's a group of these are philosophers. So the city ultimately is governed by philosophy, and if you are criminally impious, you go to this prison and you go to university, and you're going to be retrained, or you're going to learn. The primary studies there are astronomy on the one hand and the unity of virtue on the other. And so you have this institution, and this is hard to do in a short presentation. I wanted to try to bring it back to the question of modernity, but I tried to play, in the paper I tried to play off these two institutions. On the one hand, Bacon's modern institution, Solomon's House, which has a wholly different orientation towards science and what science should do and be. And in Plato's utopia, you could say in the laws, an institution that's, you know, it's kind of a proto-university, but where the highest studies are astronomy and virtue. So if you look at Bacon's utopia, for example, in Solomon's House, you'll find no mention of studying virtue. What you study is the natural world in the attempt to find ways to master the natural world. But in Plato, you know, there's nothing of the sort. And now, obviously, there's a long history attached to the development of science. But the question that interests me is, I guess to bring, one way, let me come back and say, I mentioned in the paper at the beginning the statement of the famous German philosopher Martin Heidegger, who said in his famous interview in the German magazine, Der Spiegel, only a God can save us. He characterized the modern situation that way. And so the question, I think, becomes, what's led us to this situation? Is it modern reason? Is it reason as such? And can I look at these works and determine something about that? What do I see in Bacon, and then what do I see in classical philosophy? What is the orientation of reason? And is there something about reason as such, as philosophers understand it, even in Plato, as Heidegger seemed to think, that that misses something? And does the temple represents something, that's something. Why is it, or how is it that ritual and what we can learn from ritual, even if it's only from one, one true ritual or whatever it is, how does that elude philosophers? Are philosophers just proud? Is that what it boils down to? And so I'm really trying to grapple with that question of reason and revelation in the paper, and that's a long conversation and hard to kind of, I think, articulate. I'm sorry I haven't done a better job in this presentation of articulating it, but that's at least the impetus for the paper and the question I want to wrestle with. So these questions I sort of wanted to end with. What real importance did the ancient philosophers attribute to temple and ritual? As far as I can tell in Plato, not very much. I mean, he doesn't seem to take up any of the practices that were current, or the rituals that were current, and attribute any kind of significance to them. On the other hand, if you read Plato's dialogues, particularly the private dialogues and not these sort of public political ones, you do get accounts of philosophy as a kind of initiation. Maybe. I mean, if you read a dialogue like the Symposium, where Socrates gives an account of his initiation into knowledge of Eros, through this lady, Diotima. I mean, that's full of initiatory kind of imagery, into a mystery. And so it seems to me that in Plato, the philosophic initiation replaces, whatever those other initiations were, that were out there and available. And then this last question, to repeat, what is it in ritual in particular, or again, in the inspired ritual, if you will, that might elude a philosopher? Why? I'm really stuck on that question. I'm not always even sure that I know what a philosopher is, but I try to understand that, and I want to know what philosophers miss, if they miss anything. So anyway, that takes us right up to the end of the time, but I'd be glad to take a comment or a question, a correction, anything of that sort. Yeah.
Do you see any temple significance in Book 10 of the Republic and the Timaeus? All of the cosmology, is there a connection between the astronomy, the study of the heavens, and the temple and ritual in the Greek world?
Yeah, that's a very good question. I think there has to be. I don't know much about it. I've read, Margaret Barker has an essay on the Timaeus in the temple, which you probably have read, which is quite speculative, but has some compelling aspects to the argument. And
by the time of Christians, it's read that way. My question is, was it originally understood that way?
Originally, yeah. I'm sorry that I don't know. But it's a good question. Thanks. Anyone else? Well, thank you for listening.